Some teams around the National Football League, well, they're doing their best Fat Joe impersonation. They're making it rain when it comes to free agency. The Raiders, not so much. They did make some roster moves official on Wednesday. We'll get to that plus more on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for March 13th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome here, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you if you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking out the YouTube page. Either way is great by us. We appreciate it. It helps the show grow each and every day, and it does grow each and every day. That's because of your consistent support and the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day by way of the YouTube page. So we definitely shout him out. We appreciate him, and you can do the same. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. We'll close out the show, as a matter of fact, hearing from you. Calls, texts, plenty of feedback. We'll get it all in as much as possible in segment number 3. Segment number 2, want to talk all things quarterbacks. Of course, Geno Smith, we know the Raiders made the move for him. They have not made it official yet, but what is that going to limit or not limit the Raiders to do as they continue to build this team, not only for the present, but the future? We'll talk all things quarterbacks. You'll hear from former Raiders quarterback Rich Gannon as well. Explain all that in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day, really getting you caught up on all things you need to know when it comes to the Raiders, free agency, and the rest of the National Football League. So off top, the Raiders did make it official with Adam Butler on Wednesday. Of course, we already found out that, I think it was on Sunday, that he was agreeing to a 3-year, $16 million deal. A really good deal for him. The Raiders put out in a tweet, or an email, I should say, Butler returns for his 3rd season with the Raiders after playing in all 17 games in 2024, recording 65 tackles, 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 2 passes defense, and a forced fumble. Initially joined the team in 2023, also spent time with the Dolphins and the Patriots over his 8-year NFL career. I'm really happy for Adam Butler. He's a guy who told us what he wanted to do back in Costa Mesa in training camp, and he went out and did it. It's one thing to talk about it, but as we all say, talk about it, you got to be about it. And he was absolutely about it when Christian Wilkins went down with the injury that put him on IR and finished his season. Adam Butler stepped up in a major way and was a big-time contributor. He let us know in training camp, I want to be out there for all 3 downs. I don't want to just be a pass rush specialist, and that's exactly what he did. He was a big impact player, and the Raiders are moving forward with him. They made that official on Wednesday, so big ups to him. They also made some releases official. Not that they're big surprises, but Andre James, Gardner Minshew, both guys officially released by the Silver and Black on Wednesday. This frees up about $4.5 million in cap space for the team. Again, no big surprise. I think everyone realized that Andre James and Gardner Minshew were on their way out. We know JPJ is going to be the center of the future for the Silver and Black, and we just knew Gardner Minshew wasn't it. So they made that official as well. I thought this was a really cool note. This is NFL related, but it's also Raiders related, and Isaiah Palomar to be exact. The 2024 performance-based pay distributions were announced. So what is that? Well, I'm glad you asked. NFL players will receive over $452 million in performance-based pay for their performance during the 2024 season. That's what the NFL announced. The performance-based pay program is a collectively bargained benefit that compensates all players based upon their playing time and their salary levels. Okay, so it sounds like a math problem, and I was told there was going to be no math. There isn't any math because I got the answer right here, and then I'll tell you how it relates to Isaiah Palomar. Under the performance-based pay program, a fund is created and used as a supplemental form of player compensation based upon a comparison of playing time to salary. That's easy. Playing time to salary. Players become eligible to receive a bonus distribution in any regular season which they have played at least 1 official down. In general, players with higher playing time percentages and lower salaries will benefit the most from the pool. Okay, so how does this affect Isaiah Palomar? We know he just got a 2-year contract extension from Pete Carroll, John Spytek and company. Well, not only that, why did he get that 2-year contract extension? Because when he was needed the most, I always say you don't have to get ready. If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. Well, he was ready. Isaiah Palomar was there. He was waiting, ready to jump into action if needed, and the Raiders needed him. Marcus Epps went down with the torn ACL, and that was early in the season. That immediately put Isaiah Palomar on the field consistently. He was a guy that was going to be used in, in certain situations, special teams guy. He wasn't going to be a guy that was going to do a lot of heavy lifting for the Raiders defense, but just like so many other positions, even talking about Adam Butler, right? Christian Wilkins went down. Adam Butler became Johnny on the spot. Well, Marcus Epps went down. Isaiah Palamau became Johnny on the spot. So he played a lot more than what his salary said he was supposed to pay or that they expected him to pay. Wouldn't it be nice if our jobs were like that? Hey, man, this guy has really outperformed how much we're paying him. We need to give him a raise or we need to give him a bonus. That's basically what happened. To put it into the most simple terms possible, that's basically what happened. The NFL put out a list of the top 25 guys that got pretty nice bumps and chunks of change in their performance-based pay distribution. Isaiah Palamau came in at number 17. Right? Remember, he was an undrafted free agent back in 2022 out of USC. He only made the team because he was on a local visit. Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler signed him, again, undrafted free agent, and he stuck around the team ever since. So what did he get for his efforts in 2024 as just basically a bonus? Oh, just $855,000 and 935 cents. Like that's pretty good, right? $855,000, almost $856,000 is what he earned in 2024 just in performance-based pay distribution from the NFL. So he was ranked 17th in the league out of the top 25. So big ups to Isaiah Palamau, who, again, earned all of that. As far as the guys that come from the outside, as far as the free agents go, like the Jeremy Chins, like the Eric Stokes, like the E-Robs, right? Guys like that the Raiders, Lonnie Johnson Jr., the guys that they have come in agreement with, they haven't made any of those official yet. They made the Adam Butler one official. They made Malcolm Kuntz the day before that official, but nothing from the outside. Geno Smith, they haven't made that official yet either, but they do have a press conference set for noon. And they're supposed to be, making it available with select free agents. What does select free agents mean? I don't know. Just that. Select free agents. So I don't know exactly who's going to be made available, but that'll happen at noon at the Intermountain Health Performance Center. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll start to see at least the guys that they made it official with. And one of the thoughts was that, well, Geno Smith hasn't taken his physical yet, so the trade can't go through. But apparently, and I did not know this, but it was pointed out to me by a couple people by way of Twitter. They said, well, Max Crosby actually said on his podcast that Geno Smith already conducted his physical at the team headquarters earlier in the week. Even though the trade's not official, it hasn't been announced by the team yet, hasn't been officially announced by the league as far as done. Apparently, according to Max Crosby, he's already taken his physical at the facility. So maybe they're waiting on the contract extension to be able to announce it all at the same time. Not 100% sure, but again, that was from Max Crosby on his podcast, the Rush Podcast with Max Crosby. Also, my last nugget I have for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast news and notes of the day. Cooper Kupp, the wide receiver from the Rams, he was officially released. It's not a big surprise. We knew he was going to get released unless somebody decided to trade for him. Nobody did. So, boom, there he is. He's now out there available. And I saw a lot of Raider Nation pounding the table saying, man, the Raiders need to go and attack the wide receiver position. They haven't done anything offensively. Need to go get that. I didn't understand why. I actually talked about it on my radio show a lot on Wednesday, and some people were like, no, Q, he'd be the number 1 wide receiver if he's added to the team. Vic Tafur, I talked to him as a guest on my show. He said the same thing. So maybe I'm just not seeing it, or maybe I'm just concerned because of the injury history. Last season, he only played in 12 games, had 67 catches, 710 yards, and 6 touchdowns. The last 3 seasons, he's played in 12 games, and 9 games. So to me, that's a lack of availability. I know that a lot of people love the name, know that at one point he was at the top of his game, but I just don't see it. But again, that's just me. I know a lot of Raider Nation were really high on Cooper Kupp and want to see the Raiders go and, get him, sign him as a free agent. So I asked Vic Tafur about it, and he doesn't think the Raiders will sign him because he thinks that it's going to cost too much money, and they're not really trying to spend that. And if you look at what they've done so far in free agency, they haven't really spent too much money. So that tracks with what Vic was saying, but something to pay attention to. Again, I didn't see it with Cooper Kupp, but I know a lot of Raider Nation did. I know Vinny Bonsignore said that the Raiders would have interest as well. So there's that. Again, the availability, I didn't see it, but we do know that the Raiders need to address the wide receiver position. They have obviously a great tight end in Brock Bowers, a great number 2 in Jacoby Myers, who, has been a number 1 when need be. I think he's a fantastic number 2, but I don't even see Cooper Kupp as a number 1 if they were to bring him in. I don't see any number 1s left out there available on the open market as far as free agency goes. And of course, the draft is not as deep as like even last year's draft was when it comes to wide receivers. So we'll see what happens with Cooper Kupp, but he's out there available, and I know a lot of Raider Nation really would like his services. Coming up in segment number 2, the Raiders have Geno Smith in the mix. Should that stop them from drafting a quarterback early or drafting a quarterback often as far as just trying to find their franchise quarterback moving forward. We'll talk about that. You'll hear from Rich Gannon coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of the great sponsors here on the show, and that is Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it is easy to lose track. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money and start building your wealth. There is all kind of different reasons to do this, right? So many different apps out there that will help you or say they'll help you, but they don't really do what they need to do. But if you want to check your finances, track your spending, even plan your long-term goals, this is the spot to do it. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into the quarterback conversation. We know that Geno Smith is in the mix. Feel good about Geno, right? I know that he's going to be a guy that most likely will be the starter in 2025. I know that there'll be some competition. I believe it'll be Geno, a rookie, and Aiden O'Connell all competing for it. And again, most likely it's going to be Geno Smith to get the start, at least of the 2025 season. But it's funny, this conversation about what they should do, now that they have Geno, has come up a little bit. I've asked the question, talked about it a few times myself, only because I know a lot of people think, all right, well, now that they have a quarterback, they don't need to go get one. Well, my guy, Zach Gelb from the Zach Gelb Show, he does a fantastic job nationally, had Rich Gannon on his show, and he actually talked to him and sent me a couple-minute clip of what Rich Gannon had to say, because he asked the same question that I've been asking to multiple guests that have been on my radio show. Now that Geno Smith is in the mix, does that stop them from drafting a quarterback even as early as number 6? So here's a little back and forth between Zach Gelb and Rich Gannon.
They go make the move for Geno Smith, and they trade a third-round pick for him. We'll see what happens contractually. But now a lot of people wonder, Rich Gannon, what the Raiders will do with the 6th pick. If Shedeur Sanders is somehow, some way still available with the 6th overall pick, do you think the Raiders should select him?
I do. Look, if they've done all their due diligence and feel really good about, Shedeur, then they should pull the trigger. Look, I think you look at the model that the Packers have had when they had Brett Favre and they decided to take Aaron Rodgers. When they had Aaron Rodgers, they decided to take Jordan Love. I think, you look at Geno Smith. He's done some really good things the last 3 years, but he's 34 years old. I think you're always looking for competition at that position. The other thing I would say, Zach, is that, they've got a quarterback behind Geno Smith that I think there's certainly some familiarity with and some comfort level with inside the organization. Aiden O'Connell, his first year, went 5-5, won 3 games in the division against the Chiefs, Chargers, and Broncos. And despite the fact that they fired his head coach and replaced the play caller, and they did that again last year with the play caller. So, I think there's some upside there. I think there's some experience. I think this is a guy that can step in at a moment's notice and put your team in the finish line. But I think Geno Smith is a guy that can provide some stability, some leadership, and some production for the Raiders moving forward. But you always have to be, looking at that position.
I don't know how much you're able, Rich, get into watch Shedeur Sanders, but when you see him play, just what are your thoughts on him as a quarterback?
Well, I like the pedigree. Let's start there. I mean, that's the fact that he's been around football his entire life, the fact that, he grew up in a household where football was important. I think everywhere he has been, you go back and you study him at Jackson State before transferring to Colorado. He did some good things there. He does some things well. I think the fact that he's got good arm talent. I think the ability to change the launch point when needed. Good eye discipline. I think he shows a willingness to stand in the pocket and take a hit. That's really apparent when you watch him. The guy's not going to flinch. I think very good ball placement and accuracy. Overall, very talented and experienced prospect. He's been around the game his entire life. I think he knows what success looks like. But I think like a lot of these quarterbacks in this draft class, Zach, I think he's going to need to be in the right system. He's going to need a staff and team around him to be patient with him to reach his full potential. I don't know that we're going to find a Jaden Daniels in this draft class that splashes onto the scene and wins 14 games and takes his team to an NFC championship. I don't know. I think we set the bar pretty high last season.
So there's Rich Gannon on the Zach Gelb show, and big ups to my guy for sending the sound over to me so I can use it and talk about it here on the show. I actually use a little bit of it on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness on Wednesday as well. But it's funny because I'm looking at what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing right now. Right, they are like desperately waiting for Aaron Rodgers to make the decision to go there, and most likely he probably will. Right, him and the Steelers and the Giants. I mean, it seems like that they're in a little bit of a back and forth. Both teams really want him. The Minnesota Vikings seem like that they're in a distance third, but maybe they're still in the mix as well. But in Pittsburgh, in particular, they went out and made the move for DK Metcalf. They gave him a contract extension, but they don't have him a guy to throw him the ball. Right, we found out Russell Wilson is headed to Cleveland to visit with them, then headed to the Giants to visit with them. Justin Fields is already a member of the Jets. He signed that 2-year deal with them, so he's gone. The Steelers have nobody to throw the ball, and they're a really good ran organization. I always give them a lot of props, but it just seems like they're doing things, one, that's very un-Steeler-like. Two, it's very backwards. They literally went out and made a move for their wide receiver and gave him a contract extension and have nobody to throw him the ball. So now they're getting desperate, or they already are desperate, and they're making a move, trying to make a move, put a full court press on Aaron Rodgers, who basically stands for everything that's against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everything Pittsburgh stands for is not Aaron Rodgers. Everybody I've talked to about Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers that either has played for the Steelers, like Max Starks when I talked to him on my radio show, or Brooke Pryor from ESPN who covers the Steelers, is like, yeah, Aaron Rodgers is 100% against what the Steelers do here, but they're desperate. And my guy Joe Fortenbaugh, who's part of my show, Joe and Q on ESPN Radio, he pointed out when Big Ben was getting towards the end of his career, they should have started to make the plans for the future then, and they didn't. They just continued to let it ride out with Big Ben, and they didn't get a good replacement. Like you heard Rich Gannon say what they did in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers and then Jordan Love, right? They had that plan in place. Even Atlanta last year, right? They went and signed Kirk Cousins to a big deal and drafted Michael Penix, top 10, number 8 overall. A lot of people were like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. A lot of people didn't see that coming. But they said, you know what? This doesn't work out with Kirk Cousins. We're going to have our guy in place. And so it seems like it ended up being a really good idea, even though now they have a very expensive, what looks to be backup quarterback unless they move him. But the point is, even though the Raiders have Geno Smith, I think if a quarterback is there at number 6 that they like, Cam Ward or Shador, which I don't think it'll be Cam Ward. I really, in my heart, believe he goes number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. Even the moves they've been making in free agency makes me feel like that, even more by trying to bolster up that offensive line and some weapons that they're trying to put in place, and they don't have a quarterback. So I feel like that they're positioning themselves for Cam Ward number 1, but that's a conversation for another day. So, like, if Shador is there, and of course that's my guy, that's the guy that I've been talking about, I think he'd be great for the Raiders. If he's there at 6, I don't care if you got Geno Smith. I think you got to go make that move. If you don't, say he's gone, and you don't make that move at 6, that's fine. You come around in round 2, Jackson Dart's available, that's your guy, go get him. Jalen Milroe's available, that's your guy, go get him. Whoever your guy is, it doesn't matter which one. Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, whoever you feel is your guy, I feel like you have to come out of this draft with a young quarterback. And what they should do is every single year until they find their franchise guy, get that guy. Don't just say, well, we'll just wait till next year. Oh, we'll just wait till next year. That's what got them in trouble even when they had Derek Carr. They never was like truly dedicated to going and getting a guy, right? They would pick up a guy here and there. It's like, oh, maybe he can. No, he wasn't real. He wasn't real competition for Carr. He wasn't really a guy that looked to be the heir apparent. Remember, that's what we talked about. Anyone's been listening to the show for a long time. Back in 2020 when I was saying, oh, Jalen Hurts, you should go draft him. Let him sit behind Carr. When you're ready to move on, he can slide into that position. Obviously, that didn't happen. But that's the formula that they need to follow. Like the Patriots did so many times, even though they had Tom Brady, they still drafted quarterbacks. They flipped them, went to other teams. The Raiders need to get in that habit. I hope that John Spytek, I hope that Pete Carroll, I hope that that's exactly what they choose to do. Tom Brady as well. Choose to go that route. I just think it's a bad practice if you're not drafting a quarterback consistently. And again, if your guy is there at number 6, if for some reason Shador drops to 6, go get him. Right? Again, that's the guy that I believe could be the franchise, the face of the franchise for a long time. But if the Raiders happen to believe that Jackson Dart is that guy, go get him. Don't let the acquisition of Geno Smith and even whatever you give him as far as a contract extension, don't let that stop you from addressing that position. You don't want to be like the Steelers right now, where they're sitting there holding the bag. They got a really good wide receiver. Hell, they got 2 of them. George Pickens is a really good wide receiver when he's on, right? He's just kind of hot and cold when he wants to play and when he doesn't want to play. DK Metcalf is a big playmaker, but you can't make a big play if you don't have a guy throwing on the ball, right? And so now they're so desperate. And now they have Aaron Rodgers like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and wait this thing out. I want all eyes on me, right? They don't operate like that, but they're coming from a place of desperation, and that's so unSteeler-like. The Raiders need to get in the business of operating like what have we been talking about all offseason? Serious team, unserious team, or for entertainment purposes only. They need to get into the business of acting like a serious team consistently. This would be a serious decision, deciding to go get your guy. If, again, don't force it. Don't get me wrong, don't force it. If you don't grab a guy just to grab a guy just for the sakes of it. If you believe in the guy that he could potentially be your dude, then go grab him. And then you'll have a real true competition in training camp. That's what you have to do. You have to be able to identify a good 2-3 quarterbacks that you really believe in and say, okay, we can move forward with this guy. And hell, if you're hell-bent on Cam Ward as your guy, then, like really hell-bent, and I don't think that they'd do this, then go trade up and go get him, because I don't think he's going to be there after number 1. I really don't. So if Cam Ward is your guy, if the Raiders have identified him as he's the next end-all be-all, even if you have Geno Smith, go get him. The quarterback position is the most important position in football. You have to have him. Look at the 49ers, right? They made all these moves to go get Trey Lance. It didn't work out, but they got bailed out because they got Brock Purdy. And now they're up there like dancing, don't know if they want to pay him or not. It's like, man, you better pay that dude. Because if you don't, there's a bunch of teams that are lined up that'll take him. Right? Because right now, he would be a very valuable quarterback on the open market based off the desperation of all these teams. And, oh, by the way, he could play really well. So the Raiders they have areas that they need to build. Obviously, we know this, right? There's plenty of talent that they need to add to the team. Ashton Genty would be great. He'd be a great asset if they were to pick him up. I think 6 is too high. I've said that multiple times. He would be fantastic, right? There's other guys, Mason Graham, if he's available at 6, I would have no problem them going to get him. There's a handful of guys I would have no problem for them to go get. But with that being said, similar to what Rich Gannon said, I would definitely want them to go get that quarterback if available. And the only one I see available at number 6 would be Shador, who just happens to be the guy that I like a lot. I think they need to make a habit out of drafting a quarterback year after year after year until they get their long-term guy. And then even after that, go get another guy. Go get another guy, right? Go get another guy. Just make sure that you have them in the stable, right? The one time that the Raiders went and addressed the position was like, what? They got Connor Cook in the 4th round. They traded up to go get him, and we saw how well that worked out. It didn't, right? His rookie year, he started in the playoff game against the Texans, and they got beat, and he's been out of the league for a while. Remember when Dak Prescott got selected by the Cowboys? He was a 4th-round compensatory pick. You know who they had in front of him? Tony Romo. But they knew that, hey, man, this guy's getting banged up quite a bit. Got to get a quarterback. They wanted Connor Cook. They wanted Paxton Lynch. Hell, they wanted Johnny Manziel. They settled for Dak Prescott because, well, there was a quarterback available, and they thought he had a little something. Now he's a $60 million a year man in Dallas. So, you have to continue to address the position until you get it right, especially when you know that the guy that you have is not a long-term solution. Geno Smith could be signing a 2-year, 3-year contract extension for all we know. Does not mean he's the long-term solution. He could be Mr. Right now, doesn't mean he's Mr. Right long-term. So the Raiders have to make sure that they do their due diligence and continue to stack that quarterback room with young, fresh arms until they find their guy that they know is the guy that they can move forward with for the long term. And then I'm not saying you have to go draft a quarterback every year, but you can get in the habit of drafting one every other year. It's not going to hurt you. You need to do that. It's the most important position in football. And oh, by the way, if you end up with an arm that other teams covet, they'll give you a king's ransom to get him out of there. That's why teams are talking about Joe Milton right now. Like the Patriots have Joe Milton in the mix, and there's teams that are looking at him like, you know what? Joe Milton might be something, right? The Steelers are so desperate, and I don't mean to pick on the Steelers. That's my dad's favorite team, but the Steelers are so desperate, they're talking about potentially going and trading for Anthony Richardson, who can't even get on the field at the team that he got drafted by, the Colts. Number 4 overall, they just brought in Daniel Jones, of all people. Like, quarterbacks are so valuable that guys that get washed out. Daniel Jones got cut by the Giants, signed to the Vikings practice squad, and the Colts are like, we'll take him. Here's $14 million. And he's going to compete with Anthony Richardson and probably beat him out. The Steelers are talking about maybe trading for him if he becomes available. Like, that's how desperate they are for a quarterback. You don't want to end up being that. I talk about used cars all the time or a car dealership all the time because I feel like we can all relate to that. You don't want to be the guy that goes to the car dealership desperate because they'll see you coming. Oh, yeah, hey, Q ain't got no car, or Q's car came in backfiring and smoking and the tire's low and the bumper's dragging. He needs this car. We're going to run up the price, and he's going to go out of here with a huge payment, and he's going to regret it, but he needs a car. You don't want to be that. That's what the Steelers are right now when they're talking about bringing in Rodgers. They're talking about maybe bringing in Anthony Richardson, maybe having to revert back to Russell Wilson if he doesn't sign with the Browns or the Giants. And think about the Browns. You want to talk about desperate? They gave Deshaun Watson, with all the issues he had off the field, and I know you're innocent until proven guilty, but he had all those side issues going on. They gave him $230 million fully guaranteed, and they haven't got $1 million fully guaranteed out of him. Their return on investment has been terrible, and he probably won't play this year either because he retore his Achilles. So that's what happens when you're desperate. You don't want to be desperate. So if you overinvest in the position, that's okay. One of those desperate teams that I just talked about will come calling, and they'll give you a king's ransom for your car that's available, right? Obviously no play on Derek Carr's name, but you get what I'm saying. So I don't think that this should slow them down, just like you heard from Rich Gannon when he was part of the Zach Gelb show. It should not slow them down from addressing the quarterback position, even as early as number 6. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts are next, 707-654-4693. We'll hear from you. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor, and that is FanDuel. March Madness is here. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. And right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Cannot wait. Sunday is Selection Sunday. We'll find out everyone who's dancing, men and women. So excited about it. Both tournaments are fantastic. The women's tournament, I'd actually argue and say, was even better than the men's last year. So I'm looking forward to both. But FanDuel can keep you in on the game. You can bet spreads, totals, game props, whatever the case may be. It's a fun way to stay in on the action. And the FanDuel app is simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. So there's no waiting around. How do you get in on it? Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts are after that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's switch things up, man. Let's start out with a text. This comes from John C. in Denver. It's a pretty lengthy one. It says, "Hey, Q, it's been a while since I commented on your show, but today is a year since my appendix ruptured in Mexico, and I had emergency surgery after going septic and 10 days in a Mexican hospital." Let me just pause right there. This already sounds like an adventure, brother. I'm just glad you're even texting us today. He said, "I remember the day after my surgery, we signed Christian Wilkins, and I told myself I couldn't die now that we finally had a defense that could punish Mahomes. Well, we know how that played out last season. I feel like this year's team still owes me, so I just wanted to jump in on some of our free agent moves so far. I didn't really see Geno Smith as an option. I thought a third was a lot, but the more I watch on him, and considering Seattle's line was pretty bad, I'm liking him more and more. He probably is going to be the best quarterback we've had since 2016, Derek Carr. Now we have options at 6. If Shedeur falls to us, we could take him and let him sit. If we want Genty, I think we could trade back a little and still get him. A stud lineman on either side of the ball wouldn't be bad. I want to hear your thoughts on losing Spillane. He was one I wanted the most to be re-signed. Butler and Kuntz being the other two. I think $12 million a year, though, is a little high, so don't you think that Eichenberg is ready to step up in this role? Roberts is a good signing, but I don't think he's Spillane's replacement. More likely he's replacing Diablo. I think Carroll putting his touches on Graham's defense is going to lead to good things. Anyway, keep up the good work. Go Raiders. That's John C. in Denver. Thank you for the text, my man. And again, just glad that you're texting with us, right? Anything goes bad in Mexico, things could go bad in Mexico. So I'm glad things went bad, but then they seem like they came around for you. So that's a good thing. And yeah, I mean, look, the free agent moves have not been anything that's sexy, nothing that's been over the top. I think they've been decent. I think it's kind of been lateral moves. I think E-Rob's going to be a good player. He's there on a 1-year, $3 million deal. He can't expect a ton from him. I think he's a really good run stuffer, which is exactly what we heard about Spillane. He'll probably cost you a little bit in coverage, but he's going to be wearing the green dot. So I do feel like he's probably the Spillane replacement. He's going to be the guy communicating directly with Patrick Graham, but he may be, as far as just play on the field, maybe more of a Divine Diablo. We'll see when it comes to Tommy Eichenberg, the 5th-round pick out of Ohio State. We'll see. I mean, a guy like C.J. Mosley is available. He got cut from the Jets, even though I know he's older in the tooth, and he actually got sat down last year because he wasn't playing up to par. So we'll see. But the Raiders are showing one thing, that they're not going to be spending a lot of money in free agency. I'm okay with that. I think that the goal this year is to be competitive. I don't think the goal is to try to hoist the AFC West title. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that they're kind of basically in year one, like Sean Payton was in Denver, not last year, but the year before when he first took over, right? So it's similarities like that. And I think that Patrick Graham and Pete Carroll, I think they're going to work really good together, and their job is to turn over the roster and make it competitive, not only for 1 year, but multiple years. So, John, again, thanks so much for the text. It's good to hear from you. Up next, got a call from Dominique in the Show Me State. He's calling to talk about what I talked about in segment number 2, drafting the quarterback, even though the Raiders have Geno Smith. Here he is, Dominique in the Show Me State.
What's up, Q? It's Dominique from the Show Me State. How you doing? Just want to touch on still the quarterback position. I know a lot of people, since we have Geno Smith, a lot of people don't want us to go quarterback early. Me personally, I still think we need to draft a quarterback in the first or second round. If Sanders is still on the board at 6, I absolutely would draft him. We need to develop a young quarterback, have a plan in place, and actually develop a young quarterback. That's something we haven't done in a very long time. Geno Smith is he's a good solid quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but he's still not the long-term answer here for us. So I absolutely would draft a quarterback, Sanders at 6. If he's not there at 6, still in that, maybe we trade back, or maybe in the second round we draft a young quarterback. And like I said, develop that quarterback. We've seen what Atlanta did last year, even with signing Kirk Cousins. They still took Michael Penix. I believe it was inside the top 10. We see what Green Bay did with Jordan Love. Let him sit for 2-3 years and then unleash him on the league. Let me know what you think about that, Q. Appreciate you as always, and I'll be listening. See you.
Dominique, thanks for the call. And yeah, I mean, you heard segment number 2, so you know how I feel. And really, going back to John C. in Denver's text, he said the same thing. If Shador's there, go ahead and draft him. And it's funny because John mentioned Ashton Genty, and I would like him as well on the Raiders. I just think 6 is too high, right? You've got offensive linemen, you've got defensive linemen, you've got cornerbacks, you've got different guys that could be difference makers. I think that there's a better chance to get those guys at 6, or maybe, like I said, a Shador if he drops. Again, but going back to the quarterback position, you just don't want to end up like the Steelers, man. You just don't. Or even the Raiders post Derek Carr, right? They basically have had zero answer at the most important position, right? They've gone from who they go from. Now I forget who took Derek Carr's place, but then he ended up going in. I always forget his name. I guess he was very forgettable. But Jimmy G, obviously, Brian Hoyer, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, right? Desmond Ritter, Jarrett Stidham. That was the name I was trying to think of. He's the one who took the place of Derek Carr when he got sat down, and then he ended up going to Denver as a free agent. But, yeah, they've had no answer at all, and now Geno Smith is in the mix. So, I think that that's at least going to stabilize the position. But now you have to continue to make sure you upgrade the position. So that's why they need to go ahead and be active. Go ahead and draft that quarterback if he's there. If you believe in him, go draft him. Don't hesitate because you got Geno Smith. I don't care what the extension looks like. You've got to go ahead and get the most important position in football, which is the QB. Dominique, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Ohio Raider from the 419. Q, as always, thanks for what you do for the nation. Should we take a chance on Nick Chubb? I'm not for sure how much it would cost, but it would have to be at a good price. I know he's had injuries as well, but when healthy, he could be a factor. We could still draft a running back as well. Your thoughts, Ohio Raider from the 419. Go Raiders. Thanks so much for the text. And yeah, I don't know if you need to address the running back position through free agency. This draft is so deep with running backs. I really honestly believe you can come out of this draft with 2. You can draft one. You can sign one as an undrafted free agent. You can draft 2 if you want. I don't think that you need to address it with Nick Chubb, who, as you mentioned, has been injured. His better days are obviously behind him. Man, he was fantastic, right? For the Browns for a long time, he was fantastic, but just injuries have caught up to him, and he's just not that same dude. And so, yeah, I wouldn't address the running back position with a free agent like Nick Chubb, but maybe if they decide they want to bring in some more competition for camp. But I would honestly be surprised if he makes it out of camp, especially if the Raiders go into draft and get a couple guys. I just don't. I think it would be a numbers game, and he'd probably lose as far as that goes. But Ohio Raider, thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, I just got time for a couple more. Got a call from Army Raider. He's calling to talk about what he believes is going on with the Raiders as far as the moves they're making in free agency, the way they're handling the cap, and the decisions that they're making. Here he is, Army Raider.
Hey, Q, it's your boy Army Raider. On this, free agency period and start of the league year. And I think I see what they're doing, and I think a lot of Raider Nation kind of is misunderstanding what's going on. And I know that when they came in, they said, "Oh, we're going to win now. We want to win now." And I do believe that is their mentality and what they want. But I also believe that they realize this has been a poorly run organization for years. This is at least a 2-year rebuild. And like you said, the way that the Ravens and everybody gets good is they do it each year. Well, this is our first year of doing it. This is a 2-year process until we're competing. So I think what they're doing now in my opinion, is I know the draft's still coming, but it seems to me like they're setting up to be, well, mildly competitive this year, but to truly make their run next year. You could see how they're handling the cap going into next setup for next year. You could see the pieces they're adding in the shorter term going into next year. I truly believe that the way they've approached this year, that they're looking towards next year and a long-term succession plan as opposed to let's sell our souls and overpay for 1 year of we might be better. I think they're trying to lay the foundations to be better on the long term. Anyways, that's how I'm seeing it. I know that Raider Nation's freaking out that we haven't got the big names. Normally I'd be like, oh my God, but we're not one big name away from competing. We're quite a few holes away from competing. So I like this approach of, don't want to say bargain shop, but not blow the bank, and look forward to next year and truly developing a base that can be built for years to come. Anyways, that's my thoughts. Army Raider out.
Army Raider, thank you for the call. And as always, thank you for your service. Definitely appreciate you. And I think you're spot on, right? I mentioned it, kind of hinted at it earlier in this segment, but it sucks because you want to win right now. Everyone does. The Raiders have been, losing for way too long. So you always want to win right now. But I think the goal, as I mentioned earlier and you mentioned, the goal is to be competitive in 2025, right? And then realize that you're still pretty far away. And I referenced the Broncos. Where the Broncos were year one with Sean Payton, they ended up 8-9, right? He turned over the roster, got rid of some guys, even some high cost guys that just didn't fit with what he wanted, right? Including Russell Wilson. Remember, he got rid of him and paid $90-something million or whatever the case may be for him to go away, $89 million, whatever it was. It was a whole lot of money for him to go away. He just didn't fit with what he wanted to do. He ended up drafting his quarterback in year two, and they win 10 games and go to the playoffs. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, Q, but they didn't beat, real tough teams. They got 10 wins. Right? They got 8 wins year one with Sean Payton, which already is kind of impressive, saying that they had a roster that he had to turn over. But 10 wins in year two and going to the playoffs, I'll take that. I don't care if you're not beating the Buffalo Bills, the Chiefs, the Lamar Jackson-led Ravens, right? Teams like that. I don't care if you're not the Cincinnati Bengals, teams that you expect to be really good each and every year. I don't care if you're not beating them. If you get 10 wins and you find your way into the playoffs, you've succeeded. And it only took you, you went into year two. I could see the Raiders trying to follow a blueprint like that, right? I really can, and just go from there. And that's why you're starting to see the moves that they're making. None of them are big like splashes. They're not just getting any home runs. They're getting safe base hits. They're getting guys on base. They're going to play some small ball and see where it is, and obviously try to draft really well. They have 9 draft picks right now. Try to build that team up. But again, going back to what I was talking about in segment number 2, the most important position is what? The quarterback. When Denver got their quarterback in Bo Nix, what Sean Payton identified as, hey, this is what I can do. I know what I can do with him. He fits perfect with what I want, regardless of how we felt about Bo Nix. If he was going to be a great quarterback or not, he's great for them, and that's all that matters. Year one with the rookie quarterback, they get 10 wins and went to the playoffs. That's not too bad. They were I'd probably say a little bit ahead of the curve, but I could definitely see the Raiders making moves like that. 8 wins, year one with Pete Carroll, I think is very doable. Right? I think it's 7 to 8 wins is very doable with Pete Carroll. Then you identify what you need, how you can grow, and then boom, you go and do that. That's what I think this is going to be in 2025. I hate to say it. I don't think that they're a playoff team. Don't think that they're going to be hoisting any Lombardis, anything like that, winning the AFC West. But I think they'll be a lot more competitive than what we saw in 2024, and that's definitely a step in the right direction. One more quick text. This one comes from Peter in Winnipeg. It says, hey, Q. It's Peter from Winnipeg. Quick question here. What are your thoughts on the Raiders picking up Cam Robinson for the right tackle spot, or possibly Becton or Zeitler for one of the guard spots? I'm not sure how deep this draft is for O-linemen. Now that we have a quarterback that tends to get sacked a fair amount, we should really try to protect him. Anyways, I'm excited to see what the team has in store for us all. Go Raiders. That's Peter in Winnipeg. And yeah, as far as Cam Robinson, I don't know if he'd be good at the right tackle spot. Maybe he would be for, competition for DJ Glaze, but Becton for sure. I'm very intrigued by Becton. That's a big mammoth of a man, right? That's a monster. If they were to go in that direction, I could see that, right? I that's what I would like to see them do. I know they haven't done any big splashes so far in free agency. I would like to see them attack the offensive line. And if you go and get a guy like Mekhi Becton, who was a bust with the Jets, but resurrected his career, turned his career around in Philadelphia with the Eagles, and now a Super Bowl champ, and after being kicked inside the guard, I could definitely see that. So I do think that they'll do something to address the offensive line. The draft, they can get some guards tackles. It's not real deep, but they can get some guys, especially interior guys, a little bit later on in the draft as well. So thanks so much for the text. Definitely appreciate you. Still got a call from Raider Eddie in Hollywood, Florida. A text from AJ in Arizona. Jackson from Utah called us in, and Ocho Kell from Portland hit us on the text line as well. We'll get those all tomorrow. We'll have what the Raiders made official on today. You know, they're meeting with the media at noon with select free agents. I don't know who that is. Maybe that's Geno Smith. Maybe that's Jeremy Chin. Maybe that's Lonnie Johnson. That could be other, right? That could be E-Rob or Landon Roberts. That could be a lot of different dudes. I mean, there's a bunch of guys that could be made available. I don't know who it's going to be, but it's going to be at noon Pacific time. So, of course, we'll talk about that as well. And we'll see what else we can get into in the meantime. In between time, I know on my radio show, we talking a little Georgia footballs. They had their pro day on Wednesday. And of course, I got to start doing that, deep diving into the upcoming NFL draft. So until then, tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.